Hi, I'm Dave Merlino.
I'm Dustin Sweet, and this is the Know Their Story podcast. We talk to veterans about their time in service, returning home from war, and transitioning out of the military. Hopefully along the way we'll inspire you to do the same with a veteran in your life.
Because sometimes all it takes to make the world a better place is sitting down with a friend to know their story. Okay, we're back and officially in the double digits. Episode 10,
baby.
10, which is 9 more than we thought we'd get to. Of the Know Their Story podcast. Getting back into it after being on the road for a month filming Apache Blues documentary. Glad to be back. Glad to
be back indeed. Nice to see you, Dave, from not 2 feet away.
Yeah, not to my right or left as we drive.
Exactly.
Getting to the end of an officially weird summer. Apparently the kids go back to school, but it will be no different because they're going to be home. Actually, I just realized one thing. Dustin, why don't you talk while I actually...
Oh, you want to plug your mic in?
Yeah.
That seems like an important step of the process, guy.
Thank you.
Hanging out with us today, we have a guy we met on the road. I'm not going to do this well because that's not my job, but here we go.
No, stop.
Nice.
All right. Joining us today, our first, as we were talking about right before we turned on, our first Marine for his whole career was a lieutenant colonel, 26 years, deployed to Iraq twice and to Afghanistan once, was almost ready to retire and before 9/11 hit, and to quote him, that's when it got exciting. Please welcome Lieutenant Colonel Chris Lozano. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
All the way from St. Louis, Missouri.
Woohoo! Well, glad to be here. I just want to start by saying thank you for hosting this podcast. I think it's needed and something that's a real good way for veterans to connect. So thank you.
Oh, thanks for being here, man. It was really a no-brainer to see if you wanted to be one of our guests. We were driving down the road and said, hey, what do you think? Do you think Chris is going to want to do that? And Dave said, I don't know. He either really hates us or we're good to go. And
no, he only met us for an hour, so there wasn't enough time to figure out that he shouldn't do the podcast with us.
No. So I'm pretty binary. I either really like you or I detest you. It's one of those things that I know really, really quickly.
Well, I'm glad to have passed that muster. It was a hot day there at Jim's house.
Yeah, it was, but it was enjoyable.
It was enjoyable. The company made everything just cool.
Thank you.
Yep. Actually, I was about to take the first question, but this one's always for Dustin. Do you remember what your first question is when we do these, Dustin?
No, I don't remember what I'm supposed to do at all. Chris, how did you end up in the Marines, man?
I got really drunk, and my girlfriend broke up with me, and I woke up in the morning with an English paper that said F on it, and I said, I got to do something to kick my own ass. So I literally drove down to the recruiter's office and signed up that morning, and it was that simple. You know, it was like I am going nowhere really, really fast. So it was just something I needed to do.
An F on your paper as an F this, I'm joining the Marines.
That's exactly what it was. I mean, it was that line out of Stripes about being drunk and stupid's no way to go through life, something like that. And I just decided my father had passed away and I didn't have anybody kick my ass, so I kicked my own ass.
So, the Marines are also pretty good at doing that for you too.
They did that.
Yeah, I told you how I went to college at University of San Diego, and the Marines, we went to a pottery game, Marines on one side of the stadium, Navy on the other.
Yeah.
One side was significantly more drunk and carousing than the other. I'll just leave it at that.
Oh,
So,
So,
all right.
what was your entry into that life, and how long did you serve for? And what? Give me a high overview, man. What did you get up
sure.
to?
I enlisted in November of 1981. I went to boot camp at MCRD San Diego. I went to Camp Pendleton after that. I served with 1st Battalion, 9th Marines. Just did 3 years, enough to know I wanted to go back to college. I didn't want to make $500 a month for the rest of my life. And it helped me realize that I was smart enough to go to college. And so I did that. And then in the course of getting my degree, I decided to become an officer, which is a funny story in itself, because my motivation for becoming an officer was I thought they were all really stupid, and I could make a whole lot more money being an officer. So I did, and that's how I got to be an officer. The Marine Corps is great because it allows you literally to be whatever it is that you are capable of becoming. And so when I got commissioned, I became an infantry officer, and then from that, I got into law school. I got my law degree, practiced law in the Marine Corps for about 3 years, got out and transitioned to the Marine Corps Reserve. Now, as a member of the Marine Corps Reserve, I decided I wanted to be a commander, and so I transitioned. I retrained as a combat engineer, where I spent the last 13 years of my military career. It's just an interesting little tidbit about the Marine Corps. You literally can, as an officer, you are qualified to do whatever you are trained to do, and they put no limits on you. So I became a combat engineer, and I rose through the different layers of the Marine Corps within that. And, life just was fairly routine. And I was a major in September of 2001. And September 7th, 2001, I was visiting a friend of mine down in Atlanta, and he leaned over. He was an intel officer, and he leaned over to me, and we were having cocktails, because that's what Marines do. And we were having cocktails in the backyard, and he just said, "I have a feeling something bad is going to happen." And in fact, that was just a couple of days later that it happened. Now, at that point, I was in the reserves. I was at home, and I pulled into the parking lot in where my suburban law practice office was at, and thinking nothing of the day, and just kind of a sunny early fall afternoon. And I turned on the radio, and I heard about the first airplane flying into the tower. And I remember thinking it was like a small plane. It's like, oh, that's too bad. And then, of course, as the moments move on, I realized it's much more serious. So, I went into the office and watched the first tower fall. And, I had 6 young children at home at the time. The oldest was 16 at the time. And somebody asked me, "What are you going to do?" And I just said, "I'm going home to pack." And they, why? Because that's what Marines do. We get ready to go places. And that's all I knew. That I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew I was going to be ready. So I drove home. I packed 2 sea bags. I had a packing list, because that's what we, Marines have those things. And I just laid it out. I packed, and I set the 2 sea bags by the door. And that was a Tuesday. And on Thursday, I got a phone call to report down to New Orleans by Sunday night. And then I was gone for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And in the course of that 2.5 years, first I went to New Orleans. I was, at the time, I just had an administrative job. I was a division readiness officer, which is neither here nor there, but I was involved in deploying troops. And then one day they sent me to Kuwait, and became an engineer operations officer with the Army, which was comical because Marines don't get along with the Army very well. And then from there, they made the mistake of putting me on an airplane to Bagra, or to Kandahar, Afghanistan. My job was to take these or mine sniffing dogs that were not supposed to be there, but we snuck them in. And that was my job, was to sneak them in because they were not from an allied country. And I did that, and then I just stayed. And they were asking me when I was coming back, and I said, there's stuff to do here, and you guys aren't doing it. Army, you guys are on set, and I took care of it, and I stayed there for about 3 months. And my job was to oversee minefield clearance in Kandahar and Bagram. And that was part of my job as a combat engineer, and the Army I thought was doing a pretty poor job of that, and there was operations ongoing, and they needed somebody to kind of bring it all together, and so I did that. And yep.
When you say, and this is the old customs guy in me, just curiosity, you said you snuck the dogs in. Is that like a paperwork switcheroo, or were you actually riding in the trunks of some cars?
Well, we didn't ride in the trunks. We flew in a C-130, but okay, I'll just be careful what I say here. I'll just say that they came from one theater of operations without permission going to the other theater of operations. And that happened via airplane. And my job was to make sure nobody asked too many questions.
Oh, well, then we better shut up about it.
Yeah. Oh, I got a bunch of stories like that. So anyway, that's how I got into the country with them. And then when I got there, it was just there was just a lot going on, right? A lot of combat operations very early. This is February of 2002, and it was just not very well coordinated. So I just did what Marines do. I took charge and said, I'll take care of this, and I stayed, and for about 3.5 months. And in that, we cleared a lot of ground in Bagram and Kandahar, and it allowed the Army to expand operations there. We were putting down people and equipment, and it was very, very austere, very rugged. There was no McDonald's in sight, and it was the way I really like it. It was great. It was a wonderful chance to just be doing something. But I'll tell you, the strangest experience was, when we landed in the middle of the night in the dark with no lights, we dropped down into Kandahar, and the gate opened, the door to the C-130, the ramp, and they dropped, and the loadmaster was like pointing, going, get off, and we got off. And I don't think I'd put 2 feet in a bag on the ground when the airplane's leaving. And all of a sudden it's gone, and I see that big 101st rocket sound up there, and I'm like, holy shit, Lozano, you're not in St. Louis anymore. You were a suburban attorney in St. Louis, and all of a sudden you're in Afghanistan? What the hell happened? And so that began my journey there. Once I left that area of operations, I finished that tour in Kuwait, and then went back to New Orleans, where the 4th Marine Division headquarters was at, with the staff I was on. And I thought I was going to wind down and go back, and I'd go back home. And all of a sudden, I got a call one day going. It was a secure phone call, and it was the headquarters of 1st Marine Expeditionary Force in Camp Pendleton, California, asking me if I would be willing to join General Conway's staff for the planning of what eventually would become the invasion of Iraq. And of course, I said yes. And so then I was right back in Kuwait in December 2002, where we planned for the invasion of Iraq and executed the invasion of Iraq. And I was there through late May of 2003. Came back, eventually returned to civilian life, and then was called back in 2006 and 2007 for the surge in Anbar province. And so I think that's about as quick of an overview as I can give you.
That's intense, man.
Yeah. You don't say no to a phone call like that, huh?
No, you don't. It's an extreme honor to be asked, because it was based off of reputation, and that meant a lot to me.
So after the surge, you come in, is that when you separated from the military, or did you spend some more time?
Well, so return reserve life after you've left active duty. Again, 2.5 years of active duty. I returned back to reserve status, drilling once a month, that kind of thing, periodic duty. Then went back for that 8 months of deployment, training and deployment. And when I came back, I just did one more year and then I retired. And that was just, I was up for promotion and my wife said, not if it means getting deployed again. And I said, yes, ma'am. I said, you have earned the right to ask me to retire. And she did. And I said, yes. So I retired in March 1st, 2009. And I have happily been a civilian ever since.
In terms of that year, do you think it helped with the transition to just slowly be doing the 1 weekend a month for a year? Or were you kind of like, I just like to get out?
No, it was definitely the right thing to do. I told her I needed the time to reflect and to make sure it's what I actually wanted to do. It's the only way of life I had known. And, leaving that way of life was something I wanted to be certain of. So, spending the one last year before I did that was actually really helpful.
Excellent. Dustin.
What did you return to in terms of coming out into the civilian life? Did you pick up your law practice, or when did you pick up your guitar?
Well, I came back to ruin is what I came back to. Financial ruin and nothing. I mean, the very difficult reality is that a professional like myself has no protections under any program out there. SBA won't give you a loan. There's no protection. And so I came back to a family of now 7. Great story on how that happened. But, I came back and my choice was to try to rebuild a law practice from scratch or to find something else to do. And I opted to get into operations consulting, and eventually that led me to working in IT for 10 years. And it was kind of a big, redirection of my career, but it was just based off necessity.
Yeah, it seems like a big change that a lot of guys go through when they come back, once they've had a situation like yours where you're deployed mid-service.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, if I had deployed, I had deployed before, non-combat deployments, but, when you're 18 to 21, which is 50% of the Marine Corps, you come back and then you basically you're starting your life. For those of us who deployed in those extended periods of war, at the end of our careers, it's it's life altering, in a different way in which it's very disruptive to a career path. On the other hand, I wouldn't trade the experience for anything, that I had.
Yeah, it's not like you work for AT&T and they hold your job for you.
No, that's a fact. I gave, but I don't want to be a whiner or complainer, but it was itself a very difficult transition, of which there's nobody here to really help you pick up the pieces when it's over.
Do you think, I know we've talked to, various people in the Army in terms of what they're trying to do to recognize that they could do more to help transition. In the 10 years since you separated, do you think the Marines are kind of recognizing that a bit more? Or?
I'll tell you that the problem was not with what the Marine Corps did. I went through transition assistance training, and there's certainly a lot of resources. The disconnect is in American society, and it's really abrupt. Post World War II, something like 12% of Americans were veterans, and today that number is around 3%.
Yeah,
and and I was sitting at a bar after my last deployment, and somebody came up and sat next to me, and after minute I was, getting a little agitated, and I just finally turned to him. I go, "Hey, can I help you with something?" And guy just said, "Well, my wife and I we've never met a veteran before, and they just wanted to talk to me." And I was like, "Holy shit." Okay, and I think there's no lack of gratitude, but there's just a lack of understanding of the impact it has and how to relate to that. And there's just, there's you talk. I know we're going to talk a little bit about my songwriting, but there's a line in one of my songs which is, welcome home and thank you for your service. Just don't get too close. You make me kind of nervous. And, and then the response is, I don't mean to be a snob. I don't need your thanks. I need a job. And people tune you out the minute you say you need something. They want to say congratulations and thank you and slap, yellow ribbons on their car, but they don't really they're not really interested in being inconvenienced to help. And that's really where the disconnect is.
Well, yeah. And then that's, two things kind of popped out. One, when you're talking about World War II, that also seems to be the last war. And some of it was out of necessity as we're ramping up the production effort, but it's the last war where there's a real home front push to help the war effort, in terms of saving the people. And now it's like, I bet 97% of people today wake up and don't even give a thought about the fact that we've been at war for 19 years.
No. There was a sign, I wouldn't call it a meme, but there was a picture that went around the Marine Corps. It was from Iraq, and somebody had posted just a simple handwritten sign that said, America's not at war, the Marines are at war, and America's at the mall. And it was just, look, the reality is when you're in the, when you're in combat arms, when you're in a war, you actually want people to feel normal. It's important to me that, people can go about their daily lives. That's why we do what we do, so that's not really a problem. It's what do we do then to reintegrate? And, it's just, in some ways, it's just the sheer numbers. It's the sheer difference in numbers. We have a military that's much smaller than it was in World War II, and yet a population is 3 times as big. Is how do people relate to that? They just don't see it. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. I actually had a family call me, and I thought they're going to call me for advice because their son wanted, join the military and kind of how to pick a career. And they called me and asked me, how do we talk them out of it?
Wow.
People don't see the connection.
Yeah. And the other question, it's actually literally the bumper out for us. The last thing we say on our bumper is, thank you for your service should be the start of the conversation, not the end of it. It just seems, and I don't need to signal out Shark Tank at all. I think it's a great show, but whenever there's a veteran, it's so reflexive. Someone's just going to say, first, let me say thank you for your service, and then immediately go on. I think, and I'm not putting it down. I think it's great that they feel they need to say it, but it's so reflexive. I think people don't think about it anymore.
Right.
And from all the veterans that we've interviewed, it runs the gamut. Some think it's just amazing and they love it, and some don't want to hear it at all. And not so much like, what do you feel about it, but just how, it seems to be that seems to be an area where we can bridge a gap of, it's great to say it, but don't then just think that's the end of the conversation.
Look, I got asked one time to speak at a city. I live in a suburb of St. Louis, and I got asked to speak in front of the city council about veterans issues. And I went up there and I just said, I gave a pretty direct and hard message about, need for veterans to have something to come home to in their community and the kind of support they're going to need. And they all nodded their head and then never heard from them again, because it's hard work. Right. But here's, I guess, and this isn't it's just really a philosophy I have, which is service to your country. I actually think there's a slightly different problem. The kind of the veteran, what I call kind of veteran worship, can warp a veteran's view of themselves. We are called to service as part of our country, committed to our country. I don't think service to your country is noteworthy. It doesn't make me heroic. It makes me a good citizen. So does being people who are firefighters and teachers and work at homeless shelters. Those people are civic minded and doing what they're called to do. I think the real shame is that we have people that don't feel a need to be civic minded. All I want as a veteran is for people to understand that the war doesn't end when you come home. In fact, it just starts. The greatest challenge that we have with veterans is veteran health, is mental health. And you don't see that in war. You see it in the 30, 40, 50 years after war. That's the tax on America for war is in those years. I have a Vietnam vet friend that I coached baseball with who he's now retired, but he said, he goes, his first 25 years home from Vietnam, he was a drunk and a mean one. And then finally, when he got help, he has spent the next 30 years sober and trying to recover from those things. He wasn't blaming anybody. He needed help, and that's what I think we can all do better at is get away from the superficial and do something meaningful. And, it's like when people ask you how you're doing and they don't really mean it, that's what it comes off as a lot of times is, you say that, but you're not really willing to do anything more.
Yeah. And you did mention your songwriting, and
yep,
Dustin being the one in the band, I'm going to let him take the lead on this because I know he wants to talk about it. Go ahead.
What kind of a jerk handed you a guitar and got you addicted to music, man?
So I've always been a musician. My first time I picked up a guitar, I was 8 years old. And my dad was an engineer for McDonnell Aircraft and bought this cheap little guitar. And I started plunking away at it. And then, my parents enrolled me in some Mel Bay music and I learned kind of the basics. But when I was in high school, music it was an extra emotion for me. It's a way for me to process things and it allowed my fingers to say things my brain couldn't say. And I just always loved it. And then I did the drunk thing and joined the Marines. And for a long time, music was there and I listened to a lot of music, but, I was in bands in my teen years and I really flirted with the idea of wanting to be a professional musician, but then I just put it away. And then as my family grew, it just became less and less important and less frequent. And I mean, there were years when my guitar would sit in the corner of my room and just gather dust. And then the war years happened. It's all really complicated. War changes everybody. It doesn't damage everybody, but changes everybody. And you come into it, you exit it with what you came into it, and then however further changes you. So if you're dealing with depression or mental illness, you come out of it with that and then additional experience on top of it, right? And, so I've dealt with depression my entire life, since first time I knew what the word was, I was 14 years old. And the way that I dealt with it as a young man was physicality. First it was football, and then it was the Marines, and then it was playing rugby, and then it was, I was always doing something physical. And physicality allowed me to have a way to deal with just the ups and downs of depression. Well, then the war happened, and my war experiences were, difficult, and for reasons that are very, very complicated. Some of it's, pure experience, the experience of seeing death or seeing somebody wounded, or being in danger and seeing your life nearly come to an end. All those are traumatic, but also so is separation and heightened awareness and loss and regret and and moral injury, and all the things that just pile on top of you, and all of a sudden you have this big fur ball of emotions. And so when I left as a 41-year-old man, I had a house full of young kids, and my wife got pregnant between my first and second deployments after 9/11, and I always joke around with her. I said, I was saving up more than money, and she so she got pregnant, and then we had AJ, our son, who's now a senior in high school. I did those 2 war deployments, came home, did the last war deployment and came home. And not long after, my oldest son, David, died. He died very unexpectedly of a blood clot. And, I tell people, Marine Corps made me a hard man. Holy shit. I've seen death. I have inflicted death, and this brought me to my knees. And it didn't just bring me to my knees because of just him dying, which was horrible as it was, but the thought that I missed his, really formative time. I missed the last, essentially the last 4 years of his life was disrupted, because then in the time that I was in my last deployment, he moved to Colorado, and, it was just, and dealing with the loss, dealing with the guilt and regret became too much. And, every deployment has its stories and things that are formative to you. But when I came back my last time, after, again, very difficult experience in the surge in Anbar, Ramadi, and Fallujah and all that, and after David died, I spun into a really, really dark place. And one day, a friend of mine who I learned to play the guitar with as young boys, as 12 years old, he became a professional musician for many years, and he called me, and we used to be in a band together. And he called me, and he's listening to me. He just says, Chris, brother, please pick up your guitar. Just pick it up, play it. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. And I have no idea why he told me that, except he knew that it would speak to me. And I picked it up, tuned it up, and just started plunking away. And, first it was pretty rough, and, and then I just kept playing. I kept playing. And then we started playing in his basement again. And pretty soon we had the old band together, and we started gigging again. And then one day I just said, you know what? I'd written a bunch of songs as a teenager, and they were, typical teenage crap, but I go, I wonder if it would help if I wrote some music. So I started just putting things down and writing, and it became transformative for me. It was what single-handedly saved my life. It was what 6 years of medication couldn't do for me. It gave a place for the pain to go and to live, not inside my head. Now I can visit my emotions like that, and I put them into my songs. I play my guitar. I get up every morning early, around 4:30 in the morning, and I play my guitar for at least an hour, and then I end my day playing my guitar for about an hour. And that's how I got into music. And in the course, to get back into the music, and in the course of that, I've developed a decent following of people. I was playing out, and I'm not right now, but just kind of got hooked into the Americana and folk groups out there, and have gotten I like to joke around with people that, oh yeah, I've got a pretty good following. I usually will have at least 10 people show up. It's being in the folk Americana is really lonely business. You are doomed to have most of your shows attended by your friends who are also musicians doing the same thing, but that is it. That's how I got into music, and I use it as a way to express not only my experiences, but to talk about experiences of others.
Yeah. And for those watching on YouTube, when we release this, Dustin, the internet in Taos, New Mexico is notoriously spotty. So he just sent me a text saying his whole system just crashed. So we'll see if he can hop back on. This isn't the first episode this has happened. But I, when you're saying you're playing for a bunch of other musicians, we went on the festival circuit with a short film that we'd done. Actually, you're talking about the therapeutic aspect. It was a short film that I had written after my dad died. Just about everything that you learn from your parents that kind of informs how I'm a dad now to my daughters. Although I don't teach my daughters how to shave. That was my wife's area for them. But we went out on the festival circuit, and the first one we went to was Sedona, Arizona, which was an amazing festival, well attended. Everyone's like, don't get used to this. Not all festivals are like this. Parties every night. We're like, no, this is great. But most of the other festivals were, like in the drama room of a high school, and the whole audience was all the other filmmakers with their short films there. And you talk to them, but it's kind of like, this is what I drove a few hours for. I'm not sure I like this.
Yeah.
So, but music is so proven for its therapeutic values. I mean, one of the reasons Jim Brown decided he liked us is my iPod playlist. I plugged it in at his house, and it was the playlist I'd made with my dad. So it was right in Jim's wheelhouse of all the classic. And so he's like, all right, you're cool.
That is funny. Well, I'll tell you the reason I connected with you two is just simply because if Jim trusted you, I could trust you with my story, and I felt that. And I don't, I have a lot of guys say, why don't you ever talk about your experience? And it's like, it just depends on who you are and and why. I just had a long text exchange with another veteran 2 nights ago, and we were just helping each other out that night, and I think it's good to be able to connect with people. So whether it's through music or through words or film, I by the way, I watched your Apache Blues trailer on YouTube. That was really nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been an eye-opening I mean, we've talked about it. Dustin and I have talked about it. We just had a talk with our producer about it last week of, if at the end of a documentary you've made the film you thought you were going to make, you didn't do your job. You made an opinion piece. You went out and you found a bunch of things that validated what you thought, which, wouldn't be the first time that's happened in the documentary world. But what we originally started as was just trying to learn why the Vietnam generation is so forgotten for two guys born after the war. And it became so apparent, even 5-6 interviews in, that this was more about how talking helped these guys. Some of them hadn't talked ever, and it was tough. They were tough interviews. I mean, I've done some tough interviews in my life at Customs with the team I was on, but these were hard.
Yeah.
But after it was done, you could just see them relax. And so this 4-year journey of just talking with veterans and hearing their stories is, really been an amazing thing. Like, I joked with Jim that I kind of forget that I'm not a Vietnam veteran because I've hung out with them for so long and listened to their stories. We'll see something on the internet. Like, that's crap. That's wrong. Go, no.
I used to joke around with my sons. I raised 5 sons, and I used to joke around with them that playing Call of Duty doesn't make you a veteran.
They can make you a YouTube star, apparently. Now we watch. Now, my parents got on me for playing video games, but now kids just watch other kids play video games on YouTube.
Oh, that's my youngest son.
Well, there you go. And now everyone's gonna be like, God, listen to that old man there.
Yeah.
But one other thing, when we talked in St. Louis, you said something that just stuck with me for days, just bothered me for not you bothered me, but we were talking about how you had gotten a call from one of your Marines saying that he has had 5 fellow Marines commit suicide in the last 3 months. And this is the part that's, I talked to our producer about it, and I don't want to get into the lockdowns because then this will become a 3-hour episode if I start going off on those. But there is definitely like a microcosm to the lockdowns and cutting off that avenue of talking. I'm trying to phrase this in such a way that I'm not answering the question for you, but like, what can we do? I mean, the lockdowns aren't going away probably till after the election. Oops, did I say that out loud? What can we do to help, our veterans and realize there's a mental health aspect to these lockdowns?
I think it's. Let me just kind of lay it out for you and see if this makes sense to you. I talked to you a little bit earlier about, you have the issues you bring into your work experience, and then you have what you bring out of it. And so for most veterans, when we talk about PTS, what we're really talking about is a thing that we call moral injury. All right. One of the young men that I frequently am in contact with, and we've created our own kind of little self-help group. His big thing is, I'm a piece of shit because I killed a child. How can God love me? I'm unforgivable, right? And it's just heart-wrenching to hear. And so these are people that sacrificed their youth. They sacrificed their mental health. My nephew has TBI from 2 IED explosions. He's never been the same, and he struggles, every day with the aftermath of TBI, and so their sacrifices in defense of liberty are real. They're not pretend. They're not tangential. They're not theoretical. They're very real. All right. And so what's actually going on right now is all the social upheaval is calling into question the legitimacy of their sacrifice in their heads. I'm not saying that it's real. I'm not saying that, that protest is the cause of their death. What I'm saying is, if you are sitting in my seat and you watched people die, and then you come home and you see people questioning the legitimacy of the country, that eats at the very core and the very fiber of your being. And you're asking, well, what the heck was all this for? Did I even do the right thing? Should I have done this? And that's what's going on, is the isolation is causing, there's multiple levels, right? The isolation is itself isolating, causes problems. Social upheaval is in some ways related to the anxiety of people. And it's just kind of a flashpoint of perfect storm of things. So for veterans, it's like this. There's soft touches and there's hard touches. Soft touch, I send out text messages regularly, as do people to me, just saying, hey, buddy check. Right? Buddy check. And that's all I'll say. I'll just say buddy check. And then I'll get a Roger, thumbs up, something like that. Or it might be, I'm having a really bad day, and it gets us talking. Not every veteran wants to talk about their experiences. You don't have to say, what's going on in your head. Sometimes it's just checking and seeing how they're doing. So the isolation changes how we do that. But I think, it can be done, and it should be done. And it's just done in small ways, light, small touches. We don't need interventions, and we don't need, they're already, remember, most veterans already feel isolated as it is. They feel isolated in their experience. They feel isolated in their community, sometimes even their family. They feel isolated and abandoned by the VA. They question, everything that's going on right now, whether their sacrifices was even appreciated or whether it meant anything, so now comes along this pandemic and isolates us. And I think that, again, just, human touch, and it doesn't have to be another veteran. That's who I connect with the most is, I have a lady who's wonderful therapist, has helped me out tremendously. And she's just a grandma, 70-something-year-old grandma, never served in the military, because I connected with her. Why? Because I talked to plenty of veterans. I talked to lots of Marines. I know how to talk that talk, but you want to let your guard down and you want to talk about, stuff that really eats away at you. Sometimes another veteran is not the right person to talk to, so.
Yeah, well, what you're saying, maybe it's not real, but if the veteran, perception is reality. And it reminded me when we talked to Dr. Clymer, who was the former head of Walter Reed's program for PTS. And he was saying, and in this respect, he was talking about the Vietnam generation, that, a veteran really needs to be able to wrap themselves in the flag and say what I was doing was right.
Yeah.
And when you take that from them and tell them it was not legitimate, like, it's just incredibly corrosive.
Yeah.
And you think you're doing, look how woke I am in today's terms, but it's just so corrosive.
Well, it is corrosive, and that's a great word for it. It's, I'm not a political person. I'm not. I don't. So when I talk about wrapping when you talk about wrapping myself in the flag, it's wrapped in the blood of my friends.
Yeah.
And so it means something. I'm not a flag waver. I don't even consider myself really particularly, patriotic and demonstratively. I sometimes I remember to hang out my flag. Sometimes I forget. But I'm actually I'm thinking about it. I get really sad more than anything. And sometimes, sadness comes out in anger or in other non-productive ways, but it's very sad to see that we have bought into what I call, really a false narrative of the illegitimacy of the United States, or that we are a systemically racist country. We just simply blindly accept people's people's proclamations, and as such, this trickle down effect it's having on people is real, and it's it's tremendously upsetting. But again, the answer is not simply to respond by everybody waving a flag, because that's bullshit too. I mean, that does. Honestly, I don't care. You want to burn a flag, all you prove is you're an asshole. That's your American right. That's your constitutional right to prove you're an asshole. Whatever, good for you. I don't care. But where I care is when what you're seeing is what I went through, what I did, and what my friends went through and did, and those before us didn't mean anything, didn't matter. We're a flawed but great country. And I'll take that to the grave.
Yep. And
I think that's one of the really, it's one of the really powerful things I think you bring to the table as a songwriter is having that perspective. The songwriting is a tool to channel your emotions is, pretty well documented as being an extremely powerful tool, right? And the thing that really drugs me to your songs is your voice, your connective voice to those issues really stands through in your songwriting. And
thanks.
You do a really good job of maximizing the wideness of your reach. I think your lyric choices are really strong, man.
Hey,
like your work, wow. Chris. Good job.
Hey, my fan. I like it.
You got one.
Yeah, I think you missed that part of the conversation when we were talking about how, as songwriters, you got like documentary filmmakers. Typically, the only people come see you play are other songwriters and filmmakers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I accept that because all I care about. So this is a story about Jim Brown, which so. I know actually, I know the extended family. Half the family says Brown and half the family says Braun. which is why they're, even though they're German, they're like Irishmen. Man, these guys love to fight. So that is, but so when Jim and I have known each other periodically over the years. We've been introduced. Again, the Brown family is very big, and it wasn't until he and I sat down and talked about our war experiences and connected on that level that, there's kind of that head nod. Okay, you're one of us. And he and Kathy came to see me play one night. And for him, I just looked at him and said, I'm going to play this for you, Jim. And I played the Long Way Home. And he had tears in his eyes, and I sang it for him because I know for most people, they may not get it. But when I saw how it moved him, I knew I was doing the right thing, because I was trying to give a voice to something that was real to all of us. Which is the road home is never finished. You're always on some way, at some level, still coming home. And, it's like I said before, that songwriting, the words that I choose, I choose for a reason, because choosing the obvious, oftentimes misses the opportunity to surprise people intellectually with the point you're trying to make. And sometimes the abruptness of the things that I say catch people off guard. And I think in my exchange with Dustin, I said, I make people itch, and I do that for a reason, because they're uncomfortable topics, and if you don't, I'm not looking for people who like my music. I mean, I'm not looking to make people like my music. I'm looking for people that can relate to what I write. And I accept that a lot of people, may not be interested in that. It's okay.
No, I think that's what really draws me to it is Dave and I are kind of the same way. Like there's, this is what we're doing. And if you'd like to come along, have at, we'd love to have you. But if not, if there's a door, see you later.
Oh, you know what? I've really been using good language today. Usually I use much more colorful language, but I do have an invitation for you to go, go somewhere, and if you don't like it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've had those same conversations though, because the topic of the documentary is not, easy. It's not an easy subject, and these guys really, really hung it out on what happened to them. And we had to talk and edit on our first edit of like, well, I think we're just gonna have to lean into this. And when we had a test screening this last fall, the lady's like, "Do you have to be so graphic?" And I was like, yes, it's their story. Like, to not be would, and it's not like, graphic swearing, but they explain what a downed helicopter scene is like, and why. And I said, it's important, because how can you understand how hard it is to come home if you didn't understand how hard it was to be there?
So here was my last experience within 6 hours of leaving Iraq. All right. I'd been through the surge, and I had been in my job all over the province, been out on many patrols, experienced a lot, came close to death a number of times. And now we are winding down, right? We can see the airplanes picking us up in the morning, and we are hooting and hollering and having a great time. And, we were at Al-Taqaddum, which was a air base we were going to be flying out of. And I'd taken my last helicopter ride mercifully. And, we're visiting a friend of mine. His, he had friends who were at the surgical hospital right there. When I say hospital, we're talking tents, right? So we're inside, and we're just talking, and all of a sudden there's a commotion. And I'd heard the helicopter land, and I mean, war is noisy. I can't even describe how loud being a war is. But I'd heard helicopter land, but it didn't mean anything to me. And all of a sudden the door opens, and I went from being happy and laughing and yucking it up to watching a guy who the bottom half of his body was blown off, and they have his intestines piled up on top of him. And he's obviously either dead or going to be dead. And then he's gone. It was just, the door opened up, and 5 feet away from me comes, this mangled body. And and then they're off, and then I'm back to, okay, now I'm going home, and war is like that. It's infinitely random, and that's what we live with. We live with the randomness of what happened. I mean, I wrote a song which you guys have not heard, called "I Dodged a Bullet," and it's about the randomness of war. I mean, do you mind if I tell you the story?
No, please.
Okay. So in May of 2003, we were just south of Baghdad, and we've been pushing, from the invasion. I had survived a missile strike the first day, blew me out of my chair, knocked me out for a second, got up, and that was the start to the war. Was a silkworm missile blowing me out of my chair, and survived all that, made it all the way to Baghdad, and now one day, completely out of the blue, my wife is going to have a baby. And the chief of staff calls me and says, "Hey, Lozano, your wife's going to have a baby, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, you need to get home." I said, "Well, no, sir, we're not going to leave till July." He goes, "Nah, you need to get out of here." I'm like, okay. We're in Baghdad. I know Southwest Airlines doesn't fly here. How am I supposed to get home? He just looked at me, the colonel. He looked at me, goes, "Figure it out." So I'm like, all right, roger that. So I'm kind of excited, but not really. I mean, like, I'm not sure I'm going to do this. So I just start looking around, and I realize I have two choices, and I have I can take. There's a ground convoy that's heading south from Baghdad, and we'll be going to an air base, and I can take a C-130 from there, or I could take a helicopter, Marine Corps helicopter, and I got to tell you, unless you're a Marine aviator, I can't think of many Marines that like helicopters, and the helicopters we're all flying in were built in the 60s. And yeah, they really were, and so the CH-46 was,
Yep.
Been around since the mid 60s. And so it's like, well, I can do that. That's only 2 hours, but guys, I don't know. I don't really like helicopters, and I'm going to, I'm just going to take this ground convoy because I can do what Marines do really well, almost as good as killing, is taking pictures. So I can take some pictures on my way out. And so I do, and then I make it to Kuwait, and then from Kuwait, I make it to Camp Pendleton, back home. And so between Thursday and Monday, I went from being in combat to being in my house in St. Louis. And I get there. My wife goes to the hospital Monday night. My son's born Tuesday morning. All right. So of course I'm elated. I'm completely confused how I was went from war to being in St. Louis, and it was really disoriented. But then randomly I'm reading the news, and I see that helicopter I was supposed to be on crashed and killed everybody.
Wow.
Yeah. I wish I could say I had some great insight. I just made a random choice to take some extra pictures. That's it. Right. Everybody else died. And so I keep, I didn't know those. And then not only did the 6 Marines on board die, but another Marine died, a very heroic death. He jumped into it crashed into this canal right next to where we were staying, and he jumped in to try to save him, and he drowned and died. And that's such a common level of heroism that you see, that those are stories that don't get told. But that is the randomness of war, and that's actually what a lot of us deal with. And again, I've used the term moral injury, but it's just that. It's just all right, why did I come out okay, and why did my friends die? I had another friend the eve of the invasion. I said, "Hey, see you on the other side." We laughed, and then he died. He was killed 2 days later. That's the life we accepted, and that's why the return home is so important. And right now, whereas the Vietnam vets experienced a lot of disconnect in a very hostile world, which was very real. The disconnect we have is with a lot of today's veterans, it's just the lack of not gratitude, but of ongoing support, to help them through that 30, 40, 50 years after they come back. And that's how we can be better.
Yeah. I mean, like you're saying, it's people want to do it, and they realize it's hard, and maybe they
don't ask me to do anything hard.
Yeah. I'll do whatever you need me to do as long as it's super.
Let me tell you what. I have been a member of a number. I've thrown my hat in with a number of charities over the years, and I almost always wound up leaving them after about a year or so, because what you find out is most people are in it for the photo op and to feel good. So all they really want to do is write a check, get their picture taken with somebody, and go back to their way of life. Just don't bother them, right? That's the ultimate guilt is to do that, and I see it when really what we need is this. We need this kind of thing, right? It's not, you can't win it at one shot. You need so many little steps. We don't need big steps, right? We have big things out there, but you know what helps a guy like that young man I was telling you about is just having periodic, regular, small contact to feel human. And and that's the difficulty of what we face. It's just a lifelong journey. We're like, where does it end?
Yep. Well, to be fair, if you know anyone who just wants to write a check to donate to the movie and get a picture with us and then leave, we're happy to help them.
Hey, I sold you a song for $1. You should.
It's a great deal. I'll take as many of those you want to send our way.
Well, what? Well, Well, I certainly have other songs, but I'm excited to be part of that and help out.
Yeah, we're excited to have your song.
Well, thank you, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we're excited to see how the movie ends up.
Dave, we've reached the thank you part of the interview.
I know. Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, we've had many talks how we have to get better at accepting compliments. I guess they come so rarely to us.
Yeah.
I think normally here I would ask what kind of advice you'd maybe have for people reaching out to veterans, but I think we've talked about that really well. And I know that Jim has just been so happy to be able to talk with you. Just to be able to sit down and talk. And that is kind of one of the focuses that we found is these Vietnam veterans have so much experience, 50 years of experience transitioning. And
right.
Obviously, the mountains of Afghanistan and the cities is different than the triple canopy jungle of Vietnam. But we can't encourage enough for people just reach out and share experiences, and we're not veterans, and people have talked to us. So if you're not a veteran, don't be scared about it. And I'll be honest, most of what we've done is listen, and anyone can do that.
Well, you don't have to be a veteran to do that. So look, it's an interesting line that we walk. Veterans don't want pity. They don't. They don't necessarily want recognition or adulation. They want people simply to understand that if on one particular day you're an extra dick, or you drink too much, or you get yourself in trouble, there's a reason behind it, right? War is an oddly comfortable place to be. I miss it. I miss being there. It's comfortable to me. I would go back there now if I could. And sometimes it's hard to say that. My wife doesn't understand it. Well, it's because it's life at its rawest and purest, and the brotherhood and sisterhood that you get and the fraternity that you have in common purpose is unmatched in anything you will ever experience. And for me, in those years of financial and career struggle, which were very real, was just the thought, are my best years behind me? Did I already do everything that I was supposed to do? Am I just supposed to coast now? Is that it? Was that the best I had? And it took me for a long time to realize that there was another gear. I just had to go find it, and it's just surviving to get to that day. So you guys, this is the way you get there.
Yeah, we were talking to RB Alexander 2 years ago, and he talked about, not being that 20-year-old, and now he was recognizing that he was at a different part of his life.
Yeah.
And I think as men, we really, to start off with, really have a hard time recognizing that part of our lives. You hit your 30s and you're like, I'm still totally invincible. We'll just go do this. Now I have a little more experience. Every dude under 45 is going to have that day where they're like, maybe I won't go off this jump. And that sticks out. I mean, for me, it stuck out. I remember looking at the first double I decided I wasn't going to jump over and thinking, wow, I'm getting old. and I'm turning into a different guy.
Wiser.
Yeah, wise. Yeah, we have all sorts of ways of talking about it, man. However you want to talk about it. But recognizing that you're a changed individual and that time has gone by and that, your life still serves a larger purpose.
Well, so here's a thought I'll leave you with from a veteran standpoint. A veteran is not a superhuman, and they're not even, again, particularly noteworthy or somehow better. That's actually part of the issue is we need to treat them as fellow citizens, but they have a lot to teach. And so involving them in within the veteran community, that's one of the reasons why I stay so connected to young veterans, is to pass on those lessons, not just to, active duty guys. I mean, it's really just to talk to guys who are 10, 20, 30 years behind, and the guys in front of you, and just kind of pass on that shared lineage, that comes with that experience. It's a really awesome and amazing fraternity of people. And not all of them are good, but they all have something to say, and is to encourage them to give back. And that is a really important part to healing and getting better, is to know that because when you give back, you feel worth something. You feel like you have something to give.
Very true. Very true. I mean, I always kind of fall back something Matthew McConaughey told me, when I watched his YouTube video. It was a commencement speech, and it was very true of, once he stops chasing success and worrying about whether or not this movie is going to be the best and whether or not he's going to hit the box office, because when you chase success, once you achieve success, you look for the next success, and you can't, you're always chasing. And he decided to chase joy of the fact that, oh my God, I'm making a movie and this is pretty cool. And that, I think, translates to every area of life, of not worrying about, have I topped out? Am I going to make it? Just, wake up every day. I've got two great daughters who Dustin, I will admit, are now better athletes than I am.
How old are they?
They are 13. I got twin girls.
Okay.
Top 20 cross country runners. In fact, my daughter asked me a couple of years ago, when you do a cross country course, the meets, it's a staggered start. 4th grade boys, 4th grade girls. And there's 20 minutes between each, and then the girls run 20 minutes. 5th graders run. And so, last year my daughters finished number 10 and number 17 in the city. And McKenna, who finished number 10, asked me, she's like, well, where would you have finished? And I was like, if I started with you guys, with the 7th grade girls? She's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, easy top 10. She's like, really? I'm like, yeah, but with the 8th graders. If I started with you, I'd be finishing in the top 10 with the 8th graders who started 40 minutes later.
Oh, that is great. That's funny.
But yeah, no. God, thank you so much for joining us today. This is
Chris, can we plug you somewhere? Do you got somewhere people can listen to your music?
Well, I sort of do. I do have a SoundCloud page. It's mostly demo stuff. So what's going on right now is I was in the middle of producing my what it will be a 2 CD set called War and Peace, and then the pandemic hit, and we were about 7 songs into it, so it's on a bit of a hiatus, and it will be again one very different 2 CDs. You can go to SoundCloud, Chris Lozano on SoundCloud. You can hear some of those songs. Again, they're not production quality. They're things I did on my Spire recording device in my house, and but that's just for a place to put them, and that's it right now.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
I hope you see a huge uptick in traffic.
Well, we'll see. I've managed to make it on the radio a few times. And I've got I have 2 songs on a compilation CD that I did not release. It was released as part of another project. But I'm hoping you're right. You can't chase success.
Yeah.
If it comes, it comes, and if not, whatever. I've left something for my kids to play at my funeral.
Yeah, the phrase "then the pandemic hit" is a common refrain for a lot of projects.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's true, because when you have a 4-piece band and there's no place to put 4 people, can't even rehearse, that really crimps things. Now, I have thought about just going completely acoustic and play, kind of in a, don't want to compare myself to Bruce Springsteen, but to kind of do the Nebraska thing and just play the guitar. So I may wind up doing that if this goes on too much longer.
Yeah, and then you can re-release when you get everyone back together.
I could do like the Eagles, make my second album, The Greatest Hits.
That's right.
So far.
So far, yeah.
Yeah. All right, Dustin, you had a little more chance to practice our sign out.
I'm not good at it, though.
Well,
Here we go. All right, if you're watching us on Facebook, it's going to say that we're going to be right back, but we're not. We're going to be finished. Oh, yeah? Is that what we're doing, Chris?
Yeah, I just took a picture. I did with my wife. I took a picture of the screen.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, if you're watching us on Facebook, we're gonna step out and we'll be done. Facebook will tell you we'll be right back, but that's a big fat lie. We're gone. If you like what you heard here today and you want to hear more, check us out on Apple Music and Apple Music, Spotify, or wherever your favorite podcasts are played. Is that how we're saying?
Look over my left shoulder. I wrote it out for you.
Nice.
It's backwards on my screen though. So, but no, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Chris, for joining us today. I'm going to hit end on the record. I got to move my mic out of the way to get that. Don't go anywhere, Chris. Well,
You've been listening to the Know Their Story podcast. If you made it this far, we must be doing something right. Let us know by subscribing to our channel.
and think about sitting down with the veterans in your life, because saying thank you for your service should be the beginning of the conversation, not the end.